In 2026, the people leaving Florida are not the ones who gave up on it. They are the ones who believed in it most. Meet the Garcias. Marco and Diana relocated from Columbus, Ohio in the spring of 2019, retired, financially careful, exactly the kind of buyers every real estate agent dreams about. They put down $80,000 on a 3-bedroom home in Port Saint Lucie, paid $310,000 total, and watched their equity climb like nothing they had ever seen. By 2022, that home was worth $540,000. Marco still has the Zillow page bookmarked, watching that estimate climb month after month, certain they had timed the move of their lives. They had done everything right. Then in the same week last January, 2 envelopes arrived. The first was their Citizens Property Insurance Renewal, $4,200 annually. In 2019, they had paid $1,400. The second envelope was from their homeowners association, with dues climbing to $560 a month after a 30% increase. No vote, no warning. Diana set both letters on the kitchen table and did not say anything for a long time. Add their Treasure Coast property tax bill, $7,800, and the Garcias are now carrying more than $23,000 in annual costs before a single mortgage payment. That $1,500 monthly increase did not happen because the neighborhood got worse. It happened because Florida got more expensive to insure, to maintain, and to simply exist in. So they are listing. Equity intact, dream quietly folded. When they finally put the house on Redfin, the listing drew polite traffic and almost no urgency. The same home that would have triggered a bidding war in 2021 now simply sat, waiting. But here is the question that should unsettle you. Where exactly are they going, and is their story the exception, or is it now the rule? It is not the exception, not even close. In 2022, Florida absorbed 318,000 net new domestic migrants, the largest single-year influx in state history. People were arriving from New York, California, and Illinois, trading high taxes and dense winters for sunshine and space. The momentum felt unstoppable. By 2024, that number had fallen to 62,000, an 80% drop in 2 years. And in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, the 3 counties that built Florida's reputation as America's promised land, domestic migration turned negative for the 2nd consecutive year. More people leaving than arriving. Not a blip, a reversal. Redfin's migration tracking caught the turn in real time. The net flow of searchers into South Florida, once the strongest pull in the country, flattened and then bent the other way, with more users browsing the exits than the entrances. Now, here is where the math gets brutal. 12 property insurers operating in Florida declared insolvency between 2021 and 2024. Not 12 companies struggling, 12 companies gone. When a private insurer exits a market, it does not just inconvenience homeowners. It mathematically transfers risk onto Citizens Property Insurance, the state-backed insurer of last resort. Citizens now carries 1.4 million policies. That number was under 500,000 just 5 years ago. Every policy that lands on Citizens is a household the private market decided it no longer wanted. The private market looked at Florida's coastlines, its aging housing stock, its intensifying storm seasons, and decided the numbers did not work. When actuaries walk away, the signal is not ambiguous. On Zillow and Redfin alike, that signal now shows up as a quiet tax on every listing, because the first thing a serious buyer types into the search bar is no longer how many bedrooms, but how much it costs to insure. The sticker price tells the same story. Florida's median single-family home sat at $252,000 in 2019. By early 2026, it had reached $407,000, a 61% increase in 7 years, outpacing wage growth in every major Florida metro. Zillow's Home Value Index traces the same arc in a cleaner line, and its latest forecasts now show several of those very metros giving back ground in the year ahead rather than adding to the climb. A homeowner in Broward County with a $400,000 home now faces roughly $6,000 annually in insurance, $5,500 in property taxes, and if they live in a homeowners association, and most do, another $4,800 in dues. That is $16,300 a year before a single mortgage payment clears. The Garcias are not outliers. They are the leading edge of something much larger. But the cost stack alone does not explain why 2025 became the breaking point. Something else shifted, something that turned financial pressure into genuine fear. That something was a building falling down. On June 24, 2021, at 1:22 in the morning, the Champlain Towers South condominium in Surfside, Florida, came down while 98 people slept inside. The sound, witnesses said, was like a thunderclap with no storm. 98 people died. The investigation found years of deferred maintenance, underfunded reserves, and ignored engineering warnings. The building had been slowly failing for decades. Nobody made it stop. Florida's legislature moved fast. The 2022 and 2023 Structural Integrity Reserve laws now require every condo building 3 stories or taller to complete milestone inspections and fully fund structural reserves by the end of 2024. No extensions, no exceptions. The Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation estimates more than 800,000 condo units statewide fall under these requirements. That number is not abstract. It is a bill arriving in mailboxes right now. In Brickell, the gleaming vertical neighborhood that sold Miami's skyline to the world, owners in 1980s era 12-story towers began receiving special assessment notices averaging between $40,000 and $120,000 per unit. Per unit, not the building. Per owner. Boards that could not collect assessments fast enough entered delinquency spirals. Several buildings in Fort Lauderdale and Clearwater went into receivership in 2025. The structure was sound, the finances were not. You can watch the fear in the data. On Zillow, condo values across South Florida have slipped while single-family homes held their ground, and on Redfin, older units now sit for months, repricing again and again because every buyer asks the same thing before anything else. What is the assessment, and is another one coming? The Garcias' neighbor, 1 county south in Port Saint Lucie, owns a condo. Her name is Carol. She is 67 years old, retired on a fixed income. Last October, she opened a letter from her condo association, $68,000, due within 18 months. Carol set the letter down on her kitchen counter and called her daughter. She did not know what else to do. $68,000 was more than she had paid for her first house. There was no line of credit deep enough, and the building would not wait. So who has the leverage to actually leave? The answer reveals a painful irony. The people most able to exit are the ones Florida can least afford to lose. The dominant seller in Florida's market right now is not a panicked first-time buyer or a struggling young family. It is someone between 62 and 75 years old who bought before 2020, has accumulated $200,000 or more in equity, and has made a cold, clear-eyed calculation. Sell now, before the softening accelerates. Florida Realtors data and county property appraiser records tell a consistent story. In Sarasota, Charlotte, and St. Johns counties, this equity-rich retiree profile represents the largest share of active listings. Redfin's inventory data shows those 3 counties among the fastest rising for new listings in the state, and Zillow's value index for each has already begun to flatten after years of relentless gains. These are not distressed sellers, they are disciplined ones. They watched the Surfside assessments land. They watched insurance renewals arrive in envelopes that felt like ransom notes. And they decided that protecting what they built matters more than staying where they built it. The second profile is the remote worker, the arrival from 2020 and 2021, who came for tax savings and sunshine and is now being recalled to offices in Chicago, Austin, and New York. The cost advantages that made Florida irresistible have largely evaporated. The commute that was theoretical is now mandatory. The third profile is the small landlord. Investors who purchased single-family rentals expecting reliable returns are watching cap rates compress below 4% across most coastal markets. Insurance and tax increases absorbed the margin. The math stopped working. But here is the irony that stings. The retirees leaving are disproportionately the people who held these communities together. The association board chairs, the church volunteers, the regulars at the local diner who knew the owner's name. Their departure does not just change the housing inventory. It quietly hollows out the social fabric of neighborhoods that depended on their presence. If you or someone you know fits one of these profiles, the equity-rich retiree, the returning remote worker, the small landlord, what was the moment the calculus finally shifted? Drop it in the comments. The question now is not just who is leaving, it is where $200,000 in Florida equity actually goes next, and whether the places receiving it are ready for what is coming. Federal county-to-county migration data is published every year, and when you map Florida's outflow against it, a pattern emerges that is both predictable and quietly devastating. Greenville and Spartanburg, South Carolina, Charlotte and Asheville, North Carolina, Nashville and Knoxville, Tennessee, Huntsville, Alabama, the Treasure Valley in Idaho. They are the precise coordinates where Florida's equity is landing, and they are starting to feel it. Greenville tells the story most clearly. The median home price is $290,000. Homeowners insurance averages $1,200 annually, roughly one-third of comparable Florida costs. No state income tax. A Sarasota seller who closes at $580,000 arrives in Greenville and pays cash. The house closes in a week. The local teacher earning $52,000 a year, who had been saving for 3 years, loses the bid before lunch. Redfin's migration data ranks Greenville among the top landing spots for Florida outflow, and Zillow's home value index for the metro has been climbing at a pace that would have looked familiar in Cape Coral 5 years ago. That teacher is not a Florida problem. She is a Greenville problem now. Charlotte absorbs the professional class, drawn by job market depth. Asheville draws the lifestyle retiree chasing cooler summers, at least until its own affordability numbers start climbing. Knoxville and Huntsville offer the cost structure Florida had a decade ago. The Treasure Valley in Idaho is already watching median prices spike 12% year over year. On Zillow, every one of these markets shows the same upward bend. And on Redfin, the share of out-of-state buyers paying cash has climbed sharply, the fingerprint of equity arriving from somewhere more expensive. The pattern is not subtle. Florida's equity refugees are not escaping a housing crisis. They are exporting it, replicating in miniature the exact affordability spiral they fled, in markets with far thinner economic cushions to absorb the shock. If you have already left Florida, where did the equity land and what happened to prices there within a year? Tell us in the comments. But before Florida becomes a cautionary tale and nothing more, there is something the outflow data quietly obscures, because not every town in this state is emptying out, and the reasons why matters enormously. Drive about 90 miles north of Orlando and the Florida postcard disappears. No beachfront towers, no glass condominiums catching the Atlantic light. What you find instead is Ocala, horse farms stretching to the horizon, live oaks draped in Spanish moss, and a housing market that looks remarkably like coastal Florida did a decade ago. The median home price in Marion County is $268,000. Property taxes are among the lowest in the state. And because Ocala sits well inland, private insurers have not fled. So premiums stay manageable. Net migration here is still slightly positive. People are still arriving. Zillow's home value index for Marion County is still rising gently rather than rolling over, and Redfin shows homes here still moving in reasonable time, the quiet signature of a market the pressure has not reached yet. The Villages, just south in Sumter County, tells a similar story. Its master-planned infrastructure and bulk insurance negotiating power mean individual owners absorb far less cost than comparable coastal communities. The buyers 60 and older moving there are not naive about Florida's pressures. They have simply found a pocket where those pressures have not fully arrived. On Redfin, demand in Sumter County has stayed remarkably steady even as coastal counties soften, and Zillow's values there continue their slow, durable climb. Jacksonville rounds out the picture. Duval County's employment base, logistics, healthcare, and the military means it is not purely retiree dependent. There is a renter and buyer pool with actual economic diversity underneath it. That diversity shows up on Zillow and Redfin as stability, with values holding and listings clearing at a pace the hardest hit coastal towns can only envy. The common thread across all three is distance from the coast, genuine affordability, and an economy not built on one demographic. These are not the Florida of the brochure, but they may be the Florida that outlasts it. If you want this kind of town-by-town analysis as the data keeps shifting, subscribe to FloridaPulse. Here's the question worth sitting with. Do you think inland Florida can hold its affordability advantage, or is the coastal pressure eventually going to find it? Leave your answer below. Now, I want to point you towards something, because a lot of you ask the same fair question in the comments. If everyone is moving, where exactly should I buy, and where should I absolutely not? We built the Florida Buy and Avoid list for 2026 to answer precisely that. It reviews 40 Florida towns, 20 to buy and 20 to avoid, with the real numbers on home prices, insurance, and risk for every single one. The link is in the description if you would rather have the finished list than assemble it yourself from scratch. But stay right here, because the single number that decides which of these towns wins the most and which existing homeowners end up getting squeezed the hardest is the part almost nobody is talking about, and it is coming up right now, because the honest answer is that nobody knows for certain. So what should someone actually do right now, today, if they are deciding whether to buy, stay, or sell in Florida? Here's what the data actually says, stripped of panic, stripped of hype, organized by who you are. If you are a current Florida homeowner planning to sell within the next 3 years, the window of maximum equity is narrowing but not closed. Zillow and Redfin both show Florida housing inventory up 41% year over year in early 2026. Historically, that level of inventory expansion precedes price softening within 12 to 18 months. You do not need to sprint, but you need to run the numbers now, not next spring. Pull your own address up on Zillow, then check the comparable closings on Redfin, and be honest about which direction the last 3 data points are pointing. If you are a prospective buyer, the risk is not a sudden price drop. Florida prices do not need to fall sharply to hurt you. The risk is that the carrying cost floor has risen permanently. Underwrite at current insurance rates plus 15%, not the rates the seller's agent quotes. Those numbers are already outdated. Budget for what the market is, not what it was. If you are a retiree already inside Florida's condo market, the single most acute near-term threat is assessment exposure. Any building constructed before 1990 without a completed milestone inspection and fully funded reserves is a financial liability that deserves a real estate attorney's eyes before the end of 2026. Not a financial advisor, an attorney. The distinction matters. And here is the single fact that changes every Florida real estate calculation made before 2021. Florida's homeowners insurance market will not normalize until reinsurance markets reprice Atlantic hurricane risk downward. Current climate modeling puts that repricing at least a decade away. A decade. If you are making a decision right now, buying, selling, or staying, which of these 3 profiles fits your situation? Tell us in the comments. The specifics matter more than the general picture. And if this kind of unsentimental town-by-town analysis is what you want more of, subscribe to FloridaPulse before the next envelope arrives. Which brings us back to the Garcias in Port Saint Lucie and the question we planted at the very beginning. They accepted an offer of $512,000, $202,000 more than they paid in 2019, even after 6 years of escalating costs eating into every margin they had. They closed on a 3-bedroom home in Greenville, South Carolina for $288,000, paid cash. Banked more than $200,000 in the process, their new homeowners insurance came to $1,140 a year. Property taxes, $3,200. Total annual carrying cost under $5,000, $18,000 less than their final year in Port Saint Lucie. Diana set the Greenville keys on a kitchen table for the second time in 7 years. This one did not have any envelopes on it. Here is the reframe. The Garcias did not leave because Florida failed them. They left because Florida succeeded, appreciated so aggressively that it priced out the exact people who made it worth living in. The place simply outran them, the way every boom eventually outruns the people who showed up early and built it. The dream did not die, it migrated. You can already see the next chapter forming on Zillow and Redfin, where the value lines and the inflow arrows in Greenville and Charlotte and Knoxville are bending upward exactly the way Florida's once did. And the towns receiving it will face the same reckoning within a decade, unless they look at what Florida became and choose differently while they still can.